The wind, sharp and unforgiving, often felt like a constant reminder of Alara's place in the world. It whipped around her, tugging at the heavy wool shawls she always wore, threatening to reveal what she so desperately tried to conceal. In the small Colorado town of Harmony Creek, in the year 1879, Alara stood out like a lone pine on a treeless plain. She was 6 feet, 4 inches tall, a height that seemed to stretch her endlessly towards the vast, unforgiving sky. Most women in Harmony Creek were dainty, barely reaching Alara's shoulder. Their bonnets bobbed below her chin, and their skirts rustled far beneath her knees. Alara, a widow for 2 years now, carried her grief as heavily as her height. Her husband, a kind but shorter man, had never made her feel like a spectacle. After his passing, the town's silent stares and hushed giggles grew louder, sharper, more frequent. To combat this, Alara adopted her camouflage. She draped herself in thick, dark shawls, hoping the folds of fabric would somehow shrink her, make her blend into the background. She would hunch her shoulders, trying to appear less imposing, less noticeable. Her posture, once proud and straight, had slowly curved into a perpetual question mark, as if asking the ground to swallow her whole. Her hair, the color of rich earth, was always braided tightly and tucked under a simple cloth, further reducing any sense of her true stature. When she walked to the mercantile, her head was usually bowed, her gaze fixed on the dusty path. She knew the way by heart, every rut and stone, because she rarely looked up. The sun, even on its brightest days, felt distant, like a secret joy she wasn't allowed to touch. The laughter of children, once a sweet sound, now felt like tiny needles pricking at her skin, always wondering if she was the joke. Alara longed for a place where her height was not a curiosity, where she could simply exist without feeling the weight of every gaze. A place where the wind felt like a friend, not a constant reminder of her difference. Alara knew the route to the mercantile like the back of her hand, each step a practiced avoidance of eye contact. Yet, even with her head bowed, she could feel them. The eyes, sharp as winter frost, followed her every movement. Sometimes it was just a quick glance, a flicker of surprise, then a turning away. More often, it was the lingering stare, the one that felt like a physical touch, pinning her in place. The whispers were worse than the stares. They started as soft rustles, like dry leaves skittering across the dusty street. Then, a word would emerge, clear as a bell, though meant to be hidden. Giantess, she'd heard, or beanpole. Once a small child, emboldened by his mother's silent amusement, had pointed and shouted, "Look, Mama, a walking tree." The mother had quickly pulled him away, but not before a shared laugh rippled through the small group of women gathered by the general store. Alara had felt her face burn, a hot flush spreading despite the cool mountain air. She would hurry past the blacksmith shop, where men paused their hammering to gawk. She would avoid the saloon, where drunken calls sometimes followed her, rougher and more direct. The women at the wash line, their hands busy with scrubbing, would stop and watch her pass, their conversations pausing only to restart with hushed comments about her. It made her feel like a circus act, a strange creature put on display. Despite her actual height, these reactions made Alara feel incredibly small. Each whisper chipped away at her spirit, each laugh a stone thrown at her confidence. She felt as though she needed to apologize for taking up so much space, for simply existing. It was a constant battle against the feeling of being an outsider, a battle she was slowly losing. She yearned for invisibility, a wish that seemed impossible for someone of her stature. The world of Harmony Creek was not built for women like her. Its inhabitants reminded her of that fact every single day. Their unkindness had built invisible walls around her, keeping her separate and alone. While Alara navigated her world of unkindness, another solitary soul existed on the fringes of Harmony Creek. High above the town, where pine trees clawed at the sky and the air bit with icy fingers, lived a trapper known only as Rook. He was a man woven from the wilderness itself, his movements as silent as a falling snowflake, his presence as strong as a mountain peak. Rook came down from the mountains maybe twice a year, sometimes less. His visits were always brief, focused solely on trading his furs for the few supplies he needed to survive the harsh seasons. He never lingered, never joined in the small talk at the saloon, and never sought company. His face, weathered by sun and wind, told a story of hardship and solitude. A deep scar, stretching from his left eyebrow down to his jawline, pulled at the corner of his eye, giving him a look that was both fierce and sorrowful. It was said he got it from a bear, though no one dared ask him. His clothes were made of sturdy leather and rough wool, smelling of pine needles and wood smoke. He moved with a quiet power, his broad shoulders filling doorways, his tall frame cutting a striking figure against the backdrop of the town's smaller folk. But unlike Alara, Rook's height was not a source of ridicule. It was simply a part of him, an extension of his wild, untamed nature. People didn't mock Rook. They gave him a wide berth, a mix of respect and fear in their eyes. He was a force of nature, not a curiosity. Rook carried his isolation like a comfortable cloak, not a burden. The mountains were his home, their silence his only companion. He knew the secret paths, the hidden streams, the language of the animals. His life was one of survival, a constant dance with the raw beauty and danger of the high country. When he did come to town, his eyes, the color of deep forest pools, took in everything, missing nothing, yet revealing little. He was a silent observer, a shadow passing through, always eager to return to the quiet embrace of his true home. On a particularly biting afternoon, Alara made her way to the mercantile, her heavy shawl pulled tight around her. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of spices, leather, and dried apples. A small crowd of townspeople was gathered, mostly women exchanging gossip and children darting between barrels of flour and sacks of grain. Alara knew this was often the worst place for her. The confined space meant there was no escaping the stairs, no room to disappear. She needed flour, sugar, and some lamp oil. Keeping her gaze fixed on the floorboards, she shuffled towards the counter where Mr. Henderson, the storekeeper, stood. But before she could speak, a voice, sharp and high-pitched, cut through the general hum. My, Alara, are you reaching for the sky again? It was Martha Jenkins, a woman known for her unkind tongue. A few others giggled, their eyes already on Alara. Alara felt her cheeks flush. She gripped her shawl tighter, wishing it could melt her into the floor. She mumbled her order to Mr. Henderson, who, though usually kind, seemed to shrink behind his counter when these moments happened. Martha, however, wasn't finished. Perhaps you should ask for a ladder, dear, just to reach the shelves for us little folk. More snickers followed, a few polite coughs covering outright laughter. Alara felt tears prickling at the back of her eyes, a familiar wave of shame washing over her. She just wanted to grab her things and flee. Just then, the mercantile door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold mountain air and a faint scent of pine. Every head in the store turned. Rook stood in the doorway, a towering figure against the light. His eyes, dark and deep, swept over the room, pausing briefly on the huddle of laughing women, then settling on Alara's hunched form at the counter. The laughter died down, replaced by a sudden, nervous hush. No one wanted to draw Rook's attention. He rarely spoke, but his silence carried more weight than any shouted word. The sudden quiet in the mercantile was heavier than any noise. Alara, still hunched over the counter, slowly dared to lift her eyes, first to the floor, then to the stunned faces of the women who had just been laughing. Their smiles had frozen, replaced by wide, fearful eyes fixed on the doorway. Following their gaze, Alara saw him. Rook, his tall frame, filled the entrance, his broad shoulders seeming to push against the door frame itself. The scar on his face pulled at his eye, making him look even more stern. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, swept over the scene. He saw Martha Jenkins, her mouth half open in a halted giggle. He saw the other women, their faces now pale. And then his gaze found Alara, her shoulders slumped, her face still hot with shame. He He saw the glint of unshed tears in her eyes, the way her fingers clutched at the rough wool of her shawl, as if it were a shield. He saw her pain, clear as the mountain air. A deep rumble started in Rook's chest, a sound so unexpected that it startled everyone. It wasn't a growl, but a clearing of his throat, a preparation. He took a slow step into the store, then another, his heavy boots thudding softly on the wooden floor. The sound echoed in the sudden, deep silence. All eyes were on him, waiting. No one breathed. He stopped just a few feet from Alara, his height making her feel, for the first time in a long time, not quite so alone in her tallness. His voice, when it came, was low and steady, like rocks shifting in a quiet stream. It wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the store, leaving no room for whispers or snickers. "You'll fit beside me," he said. The words hung in the air, simple and powerful. They were not a question, not an offer, but a statement of fact. Martha Jenkins' jaw dropped. The other women looked at each other, then quickly looked away. The laughter was not just silenced, it was banished. Alara felt a strange jolt, like a cold hand reaching into her chest and squeezing her heart. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't even blink. His words were like a warm blanket, a solid wall against the unkind world. Alara stood frozen, the warmth of Rook's words spreading through her. It wasn't just that he had spoken, it was what he had said, and how. "You'll fit beside me." Not a question of her fitting in, but a statement of her belonging. Her mind, usually so clouded with shame, suddenly cleared. She slowly lifted her head, truly looking at him for the first time. Rook was even taller than she remembered, his shoulders wide as an oak tree. His dark eyes met hers, and in their depths she saw no judgment, no mockery, only a quiet understanding. It was a look that spoke of vast, empty spaces, of long silences, of a solitude that mirrored her own. A deep breath shuddered through her, the first truly free breath she'd taken in years. A spark ignited within her, small but bright, like a flicker of warmth in a cold, dark room. It was a feeling she hadn't known she was missing until now, recognition. This man, with his scarred face and mountain-worn clothes, saw her not as a giantess or a walking tree, but simply as someone who belonged, someone who would fit. Her heart, which had been a tightly closed fist of sadness, began to unfurl. She had always felt so utterly alone, her height a barrier between her and the rest of humanity. But Rook, standing so close, so tall, made her feel less like an anomaly and more like a counterpart. He was an island, and she, perhaps, was another, and for a fleeting moment, the sea between them seemed to shrink. The other townspeople were still silent, but their fear of Rook had given way to curiosity and a touch of unease. They watched, unsure how to react to this strange, quiet exchange. But Alara barely noticed them. All her attention was on Rook, on the quiet strength that emanated from him, and on the unbelievable sensation that she was not alone anymore. A connection, silent and profound, had formed between two isolated souls in the bustling, yet suddenly hushed, mercantile. No more words were needed. Rook simply stood there, his presence a quiet anchor in the suddenly calm store. Alara found herself unable to look away from his eyes, which held a depth she'd never encountered. They were like the deep parts of a mountain lake, still and ancient, reflecting the world without judgment. In their depths, she saw her own long years of quiet suffering, her loneliness, and a silent promise that here, with him, it might be different. He didn't offer a hand, didn't smile, didn't make any grand gesture. He just stood, a silent monument to understanding. And in that stillness, a bridge formed between them. It was a bridge built not of words, but of shared experiences. Alara knew what it felt like to be an outsider, to be watched and judged. Rook, with his solitary life in the wild and the wary glances he received even here, surely knew it too. Their isolation, once a heavy cloak each wore alone, now felt like a thread connecting them. The air between them hummed with an unspoken language. It was a language of knowing, of seeing past the surface to the true person beneath. Alara felt an unfamiliar pull, a gentle force drawing her towards him, not in fear or shame, but in a quiet, hopeful attraction. It wasn't about pretty words or sweet talk. It was about the profound comfort of not having to explain herself. He had seen her, truly seen her, in her moment of deepest humiliation, and instead of turning away, he had offered a place beside him. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, different from the flush of shame. This was a steady, quiet heat, like embers glowing in a hearth. It was the warmth of belonging, of being recognized by another soul who understood the vast, silent world of being alone. In that shared silence, their bond deepened, growing stronger than any spoken promise could have made it. The townspeople, still rooted to their spots, could only watch, unable to break the powerful, invisible current flowing between the tall widow and the scarred trapper. The silent hum between Alara and Rook felt like a new kind of magic. Slowly, almost without thinking, Alara felt a change begin in her body. It started in her feet, a tiny push then moved up her legs. Her back, which had been curved for so long, began to straighten. It was a slow, gentle unfolding, like a flower turning towards the sun after a long, dark night. She felt the heavy wool shawl, which had been her shield, now just fabric draped over her shoulders. She didn't feel the urgent need to pull it tighter, to shrink into its folds. Rook's simple words, "You'll fit beside me," had planted a seed of courage within her. It was as if he had given her permission to be herself, fully and completely. The shame that had kept her bowed for years began to loosen its grip. Her chin lifted a fraction, then another. The top of her head, which had rarely seen the light of day, now aimed towards the high ceiling of the mercantile. She felt a stretch in her neck, a pleasant ache from muscles long and used. It was a small movement, barely noticeable to anyone not looking closely, but to Alara, it was a giant leap. For the first time, she wasn't trying to hide. She was simply standing. The townspeople, still watching, noticed the subtle change. Martha Jenkins, who had been so quick with her cruel words, now looked confused, then a little uncomfortable. Alara, however, didn't spare them a glance. Her eyes remained on Rook, who still stood tall and silent, his gaze unwavering. In his eyes, she saw her reflection, not as a woman to be mocked, but as a woman of strength, a woman who could stand tall. With each passing moment, Alara felt a little more of the old Alara returning, the one who had once walked with confidence beside her husband. The weight of others' opinions, which had pressed her down for so long, felt lighter, almost gone. Rook's quiet strength had offered her more than just comfort. It had offered her the bravery to embrace her true self. She felt the urge to breathe deeply, to fill her lungs with the air of this new, upright world. Alara stood fully upright now, her new posture feeling both strange and wonderfully natural. Mr. Henderson, the storekeeper, cleared his throat, breaking the long silence. "Anything else, Alara? And for you, Rook?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. Rook simply nodded towards the counter, indicating his usual list of hardtack, dried meat, and gunpowder. Then, his dark eyes shifted back to Alara's small pile of flour, sugar, and oil. Without a word, he reached out and gathered her items, his large hands easily clasping them. He did not ask if she needed help, or if she wanted him to carry them. He simply did it, a silent act of partnership. Alara felt a flush, this time not of shame, but of something akin to awe. No man, since her husband, had ever offered such easy, unburdened help. She watched as he paid for both his and her goods, his movements efficient and practiced. Mr. Henderson, clearly eager to see them go, quickly wrapped Rook's furs in exchange, avoiding eye contact with the women still frozen in place. As Rook turned to leave, Alara moved with him, a natural instinct. She didn't have to think about it. Her feet just followed. They walked toward the door, Rook's broad back leading the way, Alara walking tall beside him. The heavy shawl felt light, almost forgotten. Her head was high, her gaze steady, not sweeping the floor, but looking straight ahead. They passed through the mercantile door, letting in another rush of cold, clean air. The townspeople inside watched them go, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and a strange new respect. Martha Jenkins looked particularly sour. Her earlier triumph completely vanished. But Alara didn't look back. Her world had narrowed to the tall, quiet man beside her. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows. Rook paused, letting Alara adjust to the brighter light. He looked towards the mountains, their jagged peaks already turning purple in the distance. Alara looked too, a new sense of adventure bubbling in her chest. For the first time, the path away from town felt like a path toward something, not just an escape. The silence of the townspeople, heavy and watchful, followed them, but it no longer held any power over Alara. She was with Rook, and that was all that mattered. As Rook turned towards the winding path that led out of Harmony Creek and up into the wild embrace of the mountains, Alara made a choice. It wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision, but one that had been brewing in her heart for years, now brought to a boil by Rook's quiet act of acceptance. She looked at the town, at the small houses that had felt so confining, at the faces that had offered only scorn. She looked at the mountains, vast and silent, promising freedom. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice a little rusty from disuse, but clear. Rook stopped, turning his head slightly to look at her. His dark eyes, usually so unreadable, held a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by that familiar, deep understanding. He didn't question her, didn't ask why, didn't try to talk her out of it. He simply waited. Alara felt a wave of relief wash over her. With him, there was no need for explanations. He understood the unspoken language of loneliness, the deep yearning for a place where one could simply be. She felt a profound sense of belonging with him, a connection that went beyond words. It was as if their spirits recognized each other, two tall, solitary figures finding common ground on the edge of a world that had rejected them both. The thought of returning to her small, empty house filled her with a dread she hadn't realized was so strong. The thought of facing another day of whispers and stares was unbearable. But the thought of the mountains with Rook felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. There, her height would not be a flaw, but simply a fact. There, she could stand as tall as the pines, as free as the eagles. She had lived a life of hiding, shrinking, apologizing for her very existence. With Rook, she felt a powerful urge to shed that skin, to stand fully in her own truth. The mountains weren't just a place. They were a promise of a life where she could be herself, without judgment, without shame, simply Alara. And with Rook by her side, that promise felt within reach. Rook simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes. He turned and began to walk, his long strides effortlessly carrying him towards the mountain path. Alara followed, her steps light, almost buoyant. The weight of her shawl, which she hadn't even taken off, now felt like a mere wisp of fabric. She pulled it back from her face, letting the cool, clean mountain air kiss her cheeks. The path grew steeper quickly, winding through tall pines and over loose rocks. Alara, usually so careful, found herself moving with a newfound grace. Her long legs, once a source of shame, now felt powerful, perfectly suited for this climb. She looked at Rook a few paces ahead, his silhouette sharp against the setting sun. He moved with the quiet strength of the wilderness, never rushing, always steady. She matched his pace, not struggling, but finding her own rhythm beside him. For the first time in years, Alara walked tall. Her shoulders were back, her head held high, her gaze sweeping over the vast landscape opening up around them. The town, now shrinking behind them, looked like a tiny, insignificant speck. Up here, amidst the towering trees and the endless sky, her height didn't matter. It was simply part of her, a natural extension of her being, just like Rook's height was part of him. There was no need for talk. The sounds of the wind rustling through the pines, the crunch of their boots on the rocky trail, and the distant call of a hawk filled the air with a wild, comforting melody. Alara felt an equality with Rook she'd never known with anyone else. They were two figures, strong and silent, moving together through a world that finally felt big enough for them both. She wasn't following him out of dependence, but walking with him out of choice, a partner in this new, grand adventure. The sun dipped lower, painting the peaks in shades of orange and purple, and Alara felt a deep, peaceful joy settle in her heart. She was no longer hiding. She was truly seen, truly free. The days that followed were unlike any Alara had ever known. She learned to read the signs of the forest, to listen to the whispers of the wind through the towering pines. Rook taught her to track game, to set snares, to identify edible plants and berries. He didn't speak many words, but his lessons were clear and patient, his movements demonstrations of silent wisdom. Alara, in turn, discovered skills she never knew she possessed. Her height, once a hindrance, became an advantage, allowing her to reach high branches or see further over uneven terrain. She learned to make fire from flint, to skin a rabbit, and to mend torn hides with needle and sinew. Rook watched her, his dark eyes observing, sometimes with a faint nod of approval. He treated her not as a fragile woman from the town, but as a capable individual, a partner in the harsh, beautiful dance of survival in the mountains. There were no hushed giggles here, no mocking stares. Only the vast, indifferent wilderness, which judged no one by their stature, only by their strength and will. Alara never felt like a burden. She pulled her weight, contributed to their camp, and learned quickly. Her grief for her past life faded, replaced by the vibrant demands of the present. She found joy in the simple things, the warmth of a crackling fire, the taste of freshly caught fish, the sight of stars blazing in the ink-black mountain sky. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the only sounds the chirping crickets and the distant hoot of an owl, Alara looked at Rook. His scarred face was softened by the firelight, his eyes reflecting the flames. She saw in him a kindred spirit, a man who understood the profound peace of solitude and the quiet strength it built. She had found her place, not just in the mountains, but beside him. She was no longer Alara, the mocked giantess, but Alara, the mountain woman, strong and free, Rook's equal in every way, a true partner in the wild, endless world they now called home.